Hello, this is Marshall Zhukov, and here we are together again on YouTube. It's been a while since I've done any videos, so what I'm going to do is show you guys how to Accurize a Mosin Nagant rifle. And for some, maybe it'll work. For some, maybe they just don't even believe it. But my 1943 M44 carbine was shooting all over the place. And then I ran a piece of paper underneath the barrel, which we'll see how to do that. And it was catching on all kinds of stuff in there, pressure points on the stock, etc. So I sanded it out. I'll show you guys how to do that. You can do that with like a deep well socket that fits in your barrel channel around some sandpaper. So let me get this rifle taken apart, and we'll go through it. Sometimes these barrel bands are kind of a pain to get off. It may be necessary to have to depress the retaining spring with a screwdriver, or do a little bit of prying between here and the stock, being careful not to scratch any of the finish on the rifle. So just a couple little tips. I've heard people, they've spread Vaseline or something on them, or a little bit on the handguard to help it slide off, because sometimes they slide off real easy, sometimes they don't. I think it's just temperamental sometimes. Well, that didn't take too long to get apart, with a little break in the middle and the song's just ending. One of my favorite AC/DC songs, by the way. I've got the barrel out of the stock, and all I've got is a 1/2 inch deep well socket wrapped around this flooring sandpaper. Any sandpaper really will work. It doesn't matter. I like to use a really coarse grit just because it takes more off a little bit quicker. And all you're going to do is just slide back and forth in here, squeezing the top so the socket stays in there. One that fits in the barrel groove is what you want. I forgot I'd already done this one, and I've got a couple little pieces of, or just one piece right there, of some cork, some gasket cork material. Anything you can get that'll fit under there, a piece of rubber, or I suppose even cardboard if you were desperate, but that might compress after a little while. So you just go back and forth, and what you have to do is you have to keep checking. I need 2 hands for this. So what I've got here, I just slipped a piece of normal notebook paper underneath the barrel in between the stock. So we're just going to slide it all the way up until we hit the sight there. And notice there's nowhere that it catches. And here we can see the piece of cork that I have in there. I can't do this with 2 hands, and I don't have the screws in the stock. So what I'll do is put the screws back in and tighten it up, and see if we still have any pressure points, and see if we need to take anything else out of the barrel channel in the stock. Everything still looks pretty good. I've got the action screws tightened up. Our piece of paper slides in here nice and easy, all the way from the cork back to the rear sight. So we can just move that out of the way. One other thing that could possibly be a problem, and I haven't shot this rifle, this isn't my rifle, but I'm going to shoot it soon, is tightness of the barrel bands around the handguard as well. You can't really get a piece of paper up underneath the handguard very easily, but sometimes if you're testing a rifle for accuracy, it may be better to leave the handguard off and maybe tape your barrel bands or something so there's no top pressure squeezing the barrel, creating pressure points on it, because that will affect accuracy. Another thing that can also be tried, as trigger pull can also sometimes hinder accuracy if you got just a beast of a trigger, which it is known to happen on the Mosin Nagant rifles. It's possible you could try bending the sear spring a little bit, bending it back a little bit so there's less tension on the trigger, It's also possible to shim it. For example, I've seen on the internet that like surplusrifle.com or the forum I'm a member of, Gun and Game, I've seen people show pictures of shimming, similar to shimming the receiver in the stock, shimming the trigger piece. And you just take a small piece of an aluminum pop can or beer can and put it beneath the screw there, and it just kind of sets it back a little bit so there's less tension and friction right here on this cocking knob. Another option is also taking some sandpaper and wrapping it around a file, like a 220 grit sandpaper, and after disassembling the bolt and taking out your sear spring here, you can lightly and squarely sand the surface of your cocking knob and the surface on your sear spring, and then take it to a buffer wheel and polish the surfaces up until they're mirror shiny. That creates less friction, which in turn creates a smoother trigger pull. Now, it's all done at your own risk, of course, and it's very dangerous to have too light of a trigger pull. And one way you can test trigger pull is doing what's called a drop test. And I won't actually drop this rifle very hard, but you cock the rifle. This one's not cocked, but for sake of example, you cock the rifle and you hit it on the ground, kind of simulating dropping it. I would find a pad. I've got an old fishing pad somewhere, ass pad to sit on, and it works pretty good. It's stiff foam, and it doesn't absorb all the shock. So that's one way you could test out, kind of a field test your rifle. The trigger on this rifle is actually pretty nice, so I'm not even going to mess with it. My 1905 Tula had just an atrocious trigger on it, and I polished that up a little bit, and it's helped quite a bit, as well as my 43 9130 that I've got. That's the one that I put a scout scope on, and that one was really bad. I polished the camming surfaces on the bolt. The bolt is much smoother now, and the trigger pull is very nice. It's kind of long, but it's nice and smooth, so it's not bad at all. In addition to helping keep your rifle accurate, it's always important to make sure your action screws are tight. The one screw that's under here and back here on the tang. If they're loose, that can throw accuracy off as well, so that should be the first thing that's checked, ensuring the action screws are good and tight before shooting. And then another thing I thought I would add is I've got some small tap and die rethreading set here that fits the receiver bolts, or the receiver screws. They are 1/4 inch by 32 thread per inch. I got these from a place I used to work. They had to order them from Florida or something. They're probably more expensive than they should have been, but I got them. I had to use them. I had to fix 2 screws on 2 different rifles, and it worked great. It worked fine. I haven't had any problems, but if you do a lot of disassembly, it may be necessary if something accidentally gets stripped. So, a little extra info. So I think this will conclude the Accurizing video. If there's questions, comments, or additional requests, go ahead and post them, and I'll try to do whatever I can to answer any questions, etc.